Alright, so it's time to continue working with arrays, and we're going to do a little exercise which will be based on snippet number 013. So the goal of this exercise is to take any text, split it into an array of words. So basically we're taking a string and we're splitting it into an array of words. And then we're going to look for a specific word inside the text. So we're going to begin by asking the user to type something into the prompt. And then we're going to store that inside the text variable. And next we're going to have a function that will take that input and it's going to return text which will be trimmed of white space and the string is going to be split by at each space between each word, and we're going to get an array of words, an array of strings. So we're going to have a variable called groceries, and we're going to pass it whatever the user has typed into the prompt, and we're going to pass that to this function that I just described, and then we're going to add another prompt where we're going to say type now the word that you're searching for, and then we're going to use a for loop to check if groceries contain the search term, and then we're going to actually log out the result. And these two console logs are actually doing the exact same thing, only with a slight variation in code. Alright, so let's now see how this works. Basically, we are rewriting the previous exercise. We start by replacing double quotes or single quotes with backticks. And what backticks allow us to do is that we can simply add carriage returns or press the enter key inside strings that we pass to our functions, and this still works. If you do not understand what I'm saying, let's try quickly to replace the backtick with a single quote. So we're going to surround our prompt with single quotes and hit Ctrl S to save it and press Ctrl plus enter right here, and we get uncaught syntax error, invalid or unexpected token at line 10 right here. Uncaught syntax error, invalid or unexpected token. So what this means is that the JavaScript parser is expecting anything but the carriage return right here, or the new line right here. Actually, we could have added the new line and then used concatenate operator to make this work, but it's much better to actually do it with backticks because it's just simpler that way. Alright, so next we're doing the same thing as in the previous snippet, and finally, when we get down here, we are logging out to the console this string rather than this one, because this one was used in the previous example, but now we are using this one here. And this one here has this little comment that says opening parenthesis, number 2, closing parentheses, same as here for number 1. So that basically means that we've got two things that we need to note. The first thing says that strings made with backticks are called template literals, and the older term for this is template strings, and they allow us to embed expressions into strings. Alright, so that's the first thing. And the second thing says that we can do this to put our variables in, so we don't have to concatenate anything. We can simply use placeholders, that's what they are called, or in other languages this is also called a variable interpolation. So we are interpolating variables, in this case the search term variable, inside the actual string that we have added using the backticks. And the nice thing about this is we can even split it on several lines and it'll still work, so this is excellent for readability. Alright, so let's Ctrl S to save it and press Ctrl Enter again, and as we can see, it works. Alright, so that's basically backticks and strings. And in the next example, we're going to start discussing the DOM. The DOM is the document object model. Each web page that is loaded inside the browser window is known as the document. So this is the web page right here, and this web page is the document. If we type document into the console and press the Enter key, we are going to get back the full HTML code for the entire page right here. Alright, so in JavaScript, this document is actually an object. So we call it a document object. And finally, the way that this document object works is described with a model. And basically, the word model is used here because we have a model that is understood by everyone on the way that this document object should behave. So there's certain ways to access the document object, certain ways to work with it, and so on. And altogether, this entire concept is called the document object model, or very often abbreviated as the DOM. Alright, so now we need a proof that the document is actually an object. To do that, we can think back to the person object that we had in snippet 012, and basically to access any member of an object, we can type object name, this time document, and then follow it up with a dot, and then type the key of any member of the document object. So how do we know which member we can access? Well, as you've seen just now, when I press the dot, I get back a whole number of different members, basically a list of members on this object. So if I use the URL, I get back this, and this is the actual URL for this page, for this document. Alright, so Chrome gives us suggestions. We've used one of those suggestions, but another interesting one is a method on the document object, which is document.get elements by tag name. And we can use up and down arrows here. So now get elements by tag name, and I'm looking for an H1. And I'll get back all the H1s on the page. Alright, so get elements by tag name is a function, and as we already learned, we call it a method of the document object, which means, of course, that we can call it and we can give it a parameter. If you're not sure about all the ways that we can work with functions, just like a little function introduction, you can visit bit.ly/js-function-anatomy, and there you have an article that I've written on Medium that goes into a certain detail, into certain depth on the subject of functions. Anyway, to continue, we can call a method on the document object just like we've seen earlier, and we've already done it. So what we get back, as the developer console right here says, we get back an HTML collection. And an MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, is an excellent source of all things JavaScript, especially some definitions and some practical examples on how to do things. So here's a quick definition from MDN on just exactly what HTML collection is. HTML collection interface is a generic collection, an array-like object of elements in document order, and offers methods and properties for selecting them from the list. One very common exercise in JavaScript when working with different web pages is to convert an HTML collection to a real actual JavaScript array. And that's the end of the DOM exercise. In the next exercise, we're going to be doing exactly what I've just said. We're going to convert an HTML collection into an array. So let's see how that's done. Alright, so first of all, why should we convert an HTML collection to an array? Well, HTML collections are array-like objects, and that means that they sort of behave like arrays, but they don't have some array methods available, like push, pop, slice, etc. So basically, converting an HTML collection into an array, we get additional methods, built-in methods that we can then use on these newly formed arrays. To do it, there are of course several ways, but here's a simple way to do it. The first thing is that we get an HTML collection, and then we store it inside a variable, and then we simply convert it to an array using Array.prototype.slice.call. And that's basically all that we are doing right here. So let's really quickly try to do that and see what we get. So this is the first line of code, all right? And the next line of code is going to be this. And this now indeed returns a full array that we can see right here. So instead of giving us an HTML collection, it gives us an actual array. And this, of course, leads us to a question of what exactly is happening in this code right here. And that's what we're going to discuss in the next exercise. In this exercise, we're discussing just exactly what is happening in the Array.prototype slice call. There are a couple of points to make. The first point to understand is that this line of code is exactly the same as this one. And to make sure that that is really the case, let's copy this and paste it in right here. And we get back true. So basically, Array.prototype.slice.call is the same as this shorter version right here. So this shorter version is simply an easier way to type this very same thing. So that's why we did it in the previous exercise. The second point to understand is that in JavaScript, we can bind methods of one object to another object. And we can do that whenever we feel like. So to explain that, let's look at the code from example 012. And that's the objects part 1 exercise, where we had that person object and so on. So basically, we're going to do something similar, and we're going to have an object right here that's going to have a method referred to formally. All right, so let's paste it in and run it. And now, since our object is called John, we can say John dot refer to formally, and when we run it, we get back Mr. John Doe. So now if I say var Mike equals, and I add an object literal, and I say name is Mike, all right? So now when I say John refer to formally, and then I type dot call Mike, this returns Mr. Mike undefined. And why did we get back Mr. Mike undefined? Because we cannot call a non-function. In other words, call is only used on functions of objects. So you can't call Mike because it doesn't have, well, basically, let's see what happens when you do this. That's a simple exercise. All right, I get an uncaught type error. I cannot read property call of undefined, and it's undefined here because it's not a function. But if it was, we wouldn't have any problems with it. So basically, the thing that I'm trying to make you understand is that we can indeed add functionality of other objects onto a different object. We can borrow basically functionality from other objects using the call. We can bind methods from one object to another object. And to bind methods from one object to another object, we can simply do the call thing right here. So when we did that, it still worked. Basically, we did get Mr. Mike undefined, even though we have only specified the name here. And if we went further and specified Mike.lastname equals Doe, and then if we ran this refer to formally.call Mike, we would get back Mike Doe. So it would still work. So basically, even though we have not specified on our object the refer to formally method, we can borrow it by saying use the Mike object and then call the refer to formally from the John object. All right, so that's how you basically do what call means. And now Array.prototype slice basically uses the functionality of the array prototype to convert our HTML collection into an array. All right, so this finally brings us to copying search results. In this exercise, what we want to do is we want to take all the results from here and actually have them printed to the screen so it's easy to copy them.